Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling a headline that probably made you sit up and take notice. 16 billion login credentials discovered.
Yeah,
Just hearing that number, 16 billion. It immediately paints this picture of, well, total digital chaos, doesn't it?
absolutely. It sounds apocalyptic.
It really felt like every
Yeah.
password, every single online identity was suddenly just out there,
Yeah.
exposed, like some single massive company failure.
That was the initial fear, for sure.
My gut reaction was just, alarm, that feeling that the digital world had fundamentally broken. But you've hinted that the reality is maybe more complex, more intricate.
That's right. It's definitely more nuanced than those first reports suggested. While they painted this picture of one unprecedented data breach, a deeper look, one that gets into the tech details, the real nature of this data pile, it reveals something, well, different and maybe more insidious in its own way. So our mission today is really to move past those flashy headlines. We want to, dissect the technical side, understand the actual threats this poses, especially for you, the listener, the individual user.
Right.
And most importantly, give you some clear, actionable things you can actually do to protect yourself.
So this deep dive is really tailored to help you listening right now get properly informed about what's going on. Because it is significant, but maybe not how we first thought.
Exactly. It's a significant event, just perhaps for different reasons than that initial shock value suggested.
So the core message shifts then.
Mhm.
It's less about a single new breach and more about the accumulated power of vulnerabilities over time.
Precisely. It's a stark reframe for a lot of people who just see that huge number and assume, the worst kind of immediate catastrophe.
And you mentioned this is where it gets really interesting.
Yes, because it becomes a story about persistence, about aggregation on a scale that's frankly hard to wrap your head around. And it's about this sort of silent, ongoing battle for our digital identities it's much more pervasive than any single headline really captures.
Okay, let's just pause on that number again for a second. 16 billion.
Mm.
It's staggering, isn't it?
It really is. It's almost abstract, the scale.
It's so huge, it almost loses meaning. You hear 16 billion and your mind just races like, how is that even possible? What single company could lose that much data all at once?
Right. The assumption is a single point of failure.
It just feels like this unprecedented disaster,
Yeah.
a massive digital collapse. But you're saying that gut reaction, while totally understandable, isn't quite right. It's not the full story of where this data actually originated.
That's precisely it. And that's where the initial misunderstanding, the one that kind of spread like wildfire through the early reports, really missed the key detail.
Okay.
So contrary to those first sensational headlines, the 16 billion records, they don't come from a new single breach of some major corporation.
Ah, okay. So it wasn't like, Google or Amazon suddenly got hacked this year and lost 16 billion records.
No, exactly. That wasn't the scenario. That would be catastrophic. Absolutely, but in a different way.
Right.
Instead, what the researchers have carefully figured out is that this is a truly massive aggregation.
Aggregation,
I
meaning.
mean, it's a giant compilation. It's data pulled together from many different previous breaches, incidents going back years, maybe even a decade or more.
Wow.
And that's combined with credentials gathered through extensive and ongoing info stealer malware campaigns.
Info stealers. We'll need to unpack that then.
Definitely. But think of it less like a sudden earthquake, a brand new disaster zone,
Okay.
and more like this enormous buildup of sediment at the bottom of a digital ocean. Every old breach, every little info stealer success over the years adds a layer.
I like that analogy.
And now someone has just essentially scooped up a massive amount of that accumulated stuff and put it all together, organized it into this huge, accessible, and very potent archive for criminals.
And how did we even find out about this digital sediment pile?
Well, this specific compilation was brought to light by a security researcher, Bob Diachenko, working with the online publication Cyber News.
Okay.
And importantly, they'd actually been monitoring various parts of these data sets since the start of 2025. So it wasn't like it just appeared overnight out of the blue.
So it was ongoing vigilance.
Exactly. It's like digital archaeology, digging through the murky corners of the internet where the stolen data circulates. Researchers like Diachenko are constantly looking into these dark corners to understand what threats are bubbling up.
So, okay, it's not one fresh corporate disaster, but this huge collection of past failures and ongoing compromises all bundled together. Why does that distinction, single new breach versus sprawling old aggregation? Why is that so critical for us to understand? It sounds like a technical point, but you're saying it really changes things.
It absolutely changes everything
Yeah.
because it shifts our whole understanding of the risk and therefore what we need to do about it. Well, while the number itself, 16 billion, is undeniably huge and frankly worrying,
Yeah.
it doesn't represent a fresh compromise of some highly secure live system today. It's not a brand new vulnerability that just got exploited.
Got it.
Instead, it represents this consolidation of years, potentially many years, of cyber criminal activity.
Right.
It hammers home the point that data, once it's stolen, it rarely just vanishes.
Right. It sticks around.
It stays out there circulating, getting repackaged, recombined, reused by different bad actors over and over again.
So the distinction matters because...
Because it moves the focus. It moves it away from a single, isolated, catastrophic event, the kind where a company apologizes, fixes a flaw, and we move on,
Right.
towards a much more pervasive, persistent threat landscape. It highlights the cumulative effect of countless individual compromises and breaches over a long time.
So the danger isn't a new hole in the Internet's defenses.
Exactly. It's more about the weaponization of existing compromised data, but now on an unprecedented scale because it's all collected. It forces us to think less about just external corporate security and more about the ongoing nature of digital crime, the long tail of it.
The long tail.
Yeah, and how even seemingly old information, stuff you might think is irrelevant now, can become incredibly potent when it's combined with billions of other data points all ready for automated attacks. It's this background radiation of cybercrime, always there, always accumulating.
That image of the colossal digital sediment, the buildup, it really sticks with you. Which brings up the next obvious question.
Yeah.
How do you even gather something on that scale? Where do you find 16 billion credentials? Is it some kind of organized dark web library, or is it more chaotic?
That's a great question, and it really speaks to the often messy yet incredibly effective nature of these cybercrime operations. The 16 billion credentials, they weren't found in one neat, tidy database. Instead, they were scattered, spread across about 30 different data sets. And these data sets were located on misconfigured remote servers.
Misconfigured remote servers. What does that mean in practice? Like insecure servers?
Essentially, yes. Think of it like a criminal's sloppy digital storage locker. These weren't necessarily super sophisticated, hardened criminal servers built for secrecy.
Right.
Often, they were things like publicly accessible cloud storage buckets, maybe databases, or file sharing platforms that were just left open, sometimes without even needing a password, just sitting there exposed to the public internet.
Wow. So like leaving the getaway car unlocked with the loot spilling out.
Kind of, yeah. It suggests, vulnerabilities or just really lax security practices on the part of whoever was storing this stolen data. They might have unintentionally exposed it while trying to manage these huge volumes.
Which is how researchers like Dyachenko find them, presumably. Scanning for these open doors.
Exactly. They routinely scan the internet looking for these kinds of exposed directories and databases. It suggests a certain, maybe surprising level of sloppiness among some of these criminal groups, even while they're handling massive amounts of sensitive data.
And were these 30 data sets all roughly the same size?
No, not at all. The size is varied dramatically, which kind of shows the fragmented way this data was collected. Some had, say, tens of millions of records, which honestly would be a huge breach on its own.
Sure.
But then the largest single data set within this collection held over 3.5 billion records just by itself.
3.5 billion in one chunk.
In one chunk. So you have this mix of smaller, medium, and truly enormous caches of data all pulled together to make that 16 billion total. It points to lots of different sources, different collection methods over time.
Okay, what about the actual data itself? When we say login credentials, what does that look like in these files? Is it just, email addresses and passwords in a big list?
Good question. Insider analysis looking at the structure reveals a very common and actually very telling format.
Okay.
Typically, it's structured as a URL, followed by the username for that URL, and then the password for that username.
URL, username, password. Why is that specific structure so important?
Because that structure is the classic hallmark of infostealer malware.
Ah, okay, there's that term again, infostealer. Explain that. How does it work?
Right. So an infostealer isn't like malware that encrypts your files for ransom. It's different. It's designed to be a spy on your actual device, your computer, your phone.
Okay.
It sits there quietly, watching what you type, what forms you fill out online. Imagine like a tiny invisible camera pointed at your screen and a microphone listening to your keyboard taps.
Creepy.
Very. When you log into a website, say your bank or social media or email, the infostealer intercepts that URL you're visiting, the username you type in, and the password you enter right as you type them.
Before it even gets sent securely to the website.
Exactly. It grabs the data locally from your machine before it gets encrypted and transmitted over the internet to Google's or Apple's secure servers. It siphons off that live, active information directly from the source your interaction with your device.
So that's how they get such fresh, usable credentials sometimes.
Precisely. It's a highly efficient way for criminals to collect active login pairs because they're stealing them in real time from the compromised user's computer.
And did the names of these data sets give any clues?
Sometimes. Some were just generically named, like random letters and numbers, but others had names that maybe hinted at their origin, like one reportedly named Russian Federation, maybe suggesting a geographical link for the criminals or their targets. And even more revealingly, some dataset names seem to refer to the specific type of infostealer malware used to collect the data.
Like the brand name of the malware?
Yeah, kind of, yeah. Which gives researchers vital clues about the cybercriminal groups involved, their tools, their methods. It confirms this wasn't just some old database dump. A lot of it came from active, sophisticated malware operations targeting end users.
Okay, this is leading to a really critical point then. When we see huge names like Google, Apple, Facebook mentioned alongside this 16 billion number, the immediate reaction, my reaction anyway, is, oh my God, Google got breached. Apple got breached.
Right, that's the natural assumption.
Does this mean these massive tech companies actually suffered a direct hit? A breach of their own systems? Because that would be, well, that would be terrifying on a whole different level.
And that is the critical clarification. It's absolutely vital for you listening right now to understand this clearly. These companies, Google, Apple, Facebook, any major platform whose website URLs appear in these lists, they were not directly breached themselves.
Okay, say that again. They were not breached.
Correct. Their internal systems, their core databases, their super secure servers, they were not compromised as part of this event in the way we typically think of a data breach.
So where did the Google logins, the Apple logins come from?
They were stolen from users, individual users whose personal devices, their laptops, their desktops, their phones had been compromised by that infostealer malware we were just talking about.
Ah, okay. The malware on the user's end.
Exactly. It's a fundamental difference, and it has huge implications. The vulnerability wasn't necessarily in Google's massive billion-dollar cloud security setup.
Right.
The vulnerability was on someone's personal computer that got infected, maybe through a phishing link, maybe downloading dodgy software.
So it shifts the focus from corporate failure to individual device security.
Completely. It forces us away from just assuming it's always the big company's fault. And makes us ask, how secure is my own device? Your computer, your phone, your tablet?
Because the info stealer acts like that spy on your machine.
Right. It sits there, watches you type your Google password into the login page, steals it from your keyboard input or browser, and sends it off to the criminal. Google's servers might be perfectly safe, totally secure.
But if my machine is compromised, they get my password anyway.
Precisely. Your account is still vulnerable, even though Google itself wasn't breached. It really shows that often the weakest link isn't the giant corporation with huge security teams, but, you know, the device sitting right there on your desk or in your pocket.
This whole situation then, the initial massive alarm versus this more nuanced reality, it sounded a classic case of, public panic versus careful expert analysis.
It often happens in cybersecurity, yeah.
But if a lot of this data is old and it's full of duplicates, doesn't that make it less worrying? Why are we even doing a deep dive on old data? Surely a fresh breach of 16 billion records would be way scarier than recycled info.
That's a really insightful point.
It feels like some experts are really pushing back against that whole largest data breach ever headline. What are their main reasons for saying, hold on, let's not overhype this?
You've absolutely hit on a key tension here. Cyber pros constantly walk this line.
Yeah.
How do you explain serious threats without causing unnecessary panic, but also without downplaying real risks?
Right.
In this case, the caution against sensationalism comes down to a few key things that make this different from a truly fresh, massive breach.
Okay, like what?
First, as you said, they emphasize that a big chunk of this data is likely old, recycled from known breaches over the past, 5-10 years maybe. It's not brand new intel.
Got it. Old stuff.
Second, and this is crucial for understanding that 16 billion number, these kinds of compilations are almost always full of duplicates.
Duplicates, so the same email password combo appearing multiple times.
Exactly. When criminals gather this data, maybe to sell it or use it themselves, they're not usually focused on cleaning it up, on finding unique records. They care about volume, potential hits.
So my old MySpace password from 2008 might be in there like 10
It
times.
absolutely could be, yeah. If it was compromised in different small breaches over the years or shared between different criminal groups, this lack of deduplication just inflates that overall number massively.
So it's like a giant digital landfill. They just keep dumping more trash on top. They're not sorting it.
That's a pretty good analogy, actually. They're not running a sophisticated data refinery. It's more like a massive, disorganized data dump. And that password you stopped using years ago, or an email compromised on some obscure forum, it could still be in there multiple times, ready for those automated attacks.
Okay, so if a lot of it is old, and there are heaps of duplicates,
Yeah.
framing it as the largest data breach in history isn't just hype, it's actually misleading, right?
That's the argument, yeah.
It gives the wrong idea about where the real danger is and what we should be worried about defending against.
Precisely. These experts argue that, look, while the sheer size of this compilation makes it a very powerful tool for criminals,
Sure, volume matters.
calling it the largest data breach in history is misleading because it implies a single, huge, recent event, which it just isn't.
And that distracts from.
It distracts from the real story, which, from an insider's view, is maybe quieter but more insidious and persistent.
Which is?
The real story isn't one new failure we can patch and forget. The real story is this ever-growing, readily available arsenal of stolen credentials that makes widespread automated attacks easier and cheaper than ever.
An arsenal.
Yeah.
Like a library of stolen keys.
Exactly. A massive pre-sorted library of keys built up over years. Maybe many of the keys are old, but if even a small percentage still work on some lock somewhere, that's incredibly valuable at this scale.
And because it's readily available?
It lowers the bar for criminals. Even less skilled attackers don't need to pull off complex hacks anymore. They can just grab these existing compilations and run automated tools. It makes launching widespread attacks against millions of individuals much easier, much cheaper.
So what's fascinating isn't just the number, but how the availability of all this old data changes the game.
Absolutely. It shifts the whole criminal paradigm. Instead of needing to invest heavily in getting new credentials, they can just buy or download these huge existing lists for relatively little money.
So the focus shifts from how do I steal passwords to how fast can I use all the passwords I already have access to?
You've got it. It enables this more automated, less resource-intensive type of cybercrime. It affects potentially millions of us, not with one big bang, but with this continuous, grinding background noise of automated attacks.
A chronic condition for the internet, not an acute emergency.
That's a great way to put it. And that makes it harder for people to stay vigilant because it's not one big, scary event. It's this constant, low-level hum of threat.
Okay, so if it's not a fresh breach, and a lot of it is old, duplicated data, what is the most immediate, the most dangerous threat from this compilation right now? What should you, listening, be most worried about today, knowing this 16 billion record pile exists?
The number one most immediate threat is something called credential stuffing.
Credential stuffing. We hear that term a lot. Break it down.
Sure, it's basically an automated attack. Criminals take these huge lists of leaked usernames and passwords, like the billions in this compilation,
Okay.
and they use bots, automated software, to systematically try those logins on tons of other websites, not just the site where it was originally stolen, but everywhere. Banks, email, shopping sites, social media, you name it.
Like trying a stolen key in every door on the street.
Exactly like that. They have this giant digital keyring with billions of keys, and they just automatically try each key in millions of locks, hoping for a match.
And why does that actually work? It seems like it shouldn't if the password was stolen from, say, an old forum.
It works devastatingly well because of one incredibly common, incredibly risky habit: people reusing passwords across multiple services.
Ah, the cardinal sin of passwords.
It really is. We all know we shouldn't, but let's be honest, many people still do it, right? Maybe for less important accounts.
Guilty as charged, probably, at some point.
We all are, likely. But if you use the same email and password for, say, an online game and also for your main email account, and that game gets breached, even if it was years ago.
Then criminals take that pair.
And they stuff it into the login forms for Google, Microsoft, your bank, everything, hoping it works somewhere else. And with 16 billion credentials to draw from, the scale of these automated attacks just becomes immense. They can try millions of combinations very quickly.
That makes total sense. It exploits our own, well, laziness or convenience seeking. But you mentioned earlier, is there something that makes this specific 16 billion compilation even more dangerous than just a regular list of old passwords?
Yes. And this is where we come back to that difference between old breach data and infostealer logs. It's absolutely critical.
Okay.
What makes this compilation particularly dangerous is that it likely includes recent logs directly from infostealer malware infections.
And those logs contain more than just the password.
Much more. Unlike a simple list from a database breach, URL, username, password, these infostealer logs often contain a whole treasure trove of other sensitive stuff scraped directly from your browser and device.
Like what?
Things like active session cookies, browser fingerprints, autofill data, maybe saved addresses, even credit card numbers if you store them in your browser, cryptocurrency wallet details, sometimes even system information or screenshots.
Session cookie.
Uh-huh.
Explain those again. Why are they so bad?
Right. So a session cookie is like a temporary digital ID card. When you log into a website and maybe do your MFA check,
Yeah.
once you're in, the site gives your browser this cookie to say, okay, I know who you are for this session. You don't need to log in again for every click. It keeps you logged in.
Got it. Like a temporary pass.
Exactly.
Mm.
Now, if infostealer malware on your device steals that active session cookie from your browser,
Uh-oh.
the attacker can then basically take that cookie and present it to the website themselves. They can often just paste it into their own browser and poof, they're logged in as you.
Without needing the password.
Whatever.
Without needing the MFA code again.
Often, yes. Because the website sees the valid session cookie, the temporary pass, and thinks it's still you, continuing your already authenticated session. It effectively bypasses the login process, including MFA, because the system thinks you're already authenticated.
Wow. Okay, that is a game changer. That goes way beyond just knowing my password.
It absolutely does. And things like browser fingerprints, that's data about your specific browser setup extensions, fonts, operating system, screen resolution. It helps websites identify your specific device.
And attackers can use that too.
They can use it to make their stolen sessions look more legitimate, maybe bypass some anti-fraud checks. It adds another layer to their ability to impersonate you convincingly.
So connecting this back,
Mm-hmm.
even if I have strong passwords and use MFA everywhere, if my actual device gets infected with an info stealer,
Then potentially, yes, even those strong defenses could be bypassed if the malware grabs that session cookie or other critical data after you've logged in, or intercepts credentials before they're protected.
that's sobering. It really drives home that endpoint security, the security of my own computer, is just as critical.
It's absolutely critical. The security chain is only as strong as its weakest link, and sometimes, unfortunately, that link is the device we're using every day. This isn't just about them knowing your password. It's about them potentially being able to act as you online in a much deeper way.
Okay, that whole piece about info stealers and potentially bypassing MFA,
Rare.
that's genuinely alarming. It can make anyone feel a bit, well, helpless, especially if they thought MFA was the ultimate silver bullet.
It can feel that way, I understand.
So what do we do? What can you, listening right now, practically do to protect yourself against this kind of threat, especially these advanced info stealers? What's the playbook?
You're right, it can sound overwhelming, but the good news is there are very concrete, universally recommended things that make a huge difference. It really comes down to proactive personal cyber hygiene. Diligence is key.
Okay, lay them out for us. Step one.
Step one, and it's the absolute foundation. Use a different strong password for every single online account. Full stop.
Every single one. No exception.
No exceptions. This is your #1 defense against credential stuffing. If one account gets compromised, unique passwords mean the damage is contained. The rest of your digital life isn't immediately vulnerable.
But remembering hundreds of unique, complex passwords, that's impossible, right?
For a human, absolutely. Which is why password managers are no longer just a nice to have. They are essential. Critical.
Explain why they're so crucial.
A good password manager generates truly random, strong, unique passwords for every site. It securely stores them in an encrypted vault, and it can automatically fill them in for you when you log in.
So it takes the memory burden off me and ensures they're actually strong and unique.
Precisely. It solves the human problem of password management while dramatically improving your security. Use one. Seriously, find a reputable one and use it.
Okay, non-negotiable.
Yeah.
Unique passwords, made easy by a password manager. Got it. What's layer number 2?
Layer 2 is multi-factor authentication, MFA. Enable it wherever it is offered, period.
Even though we just talked about how some info stealer attacks might bypass it with session cookies.
Yes, absolutely. Think about it. While those session hijacking attacks are a serious threat, the vast majority of automated credential stuffing attacks are just trying username-password combinations.
Ah, okay. So MFA stops those dead in their tracks.
Exactly. It adds that crucial second lock to the door. Even if they have your password, the key, they still need that code from your phone app or a tap on a physical key to get in. It blocks the overwhelming majority of simple login attempts using stolen passwords.
So it's still a hugely powerful defense, even if not 100% foolproof against every single advanced attack.
Absolutely. And prioritize stronger MFA methods if you can. Authenticator apps like Google Authenticator, Authy, or even better, physical security keys like a YubiKey, are generally more secure than just getting codes via SMS text message.
Why is SMS less secure?
SMS messages can sometimes be intercepted through SIM swapping attacks or malware on your phone. Apps and physical keys don't have that specific vulnerability, but any MFA is far, far better than none.
Okay, unique passwords via manager enable MFA everywhere, preferably app or key-based. What's number 3?
Number 3 goes back to how those info stealers often get on your device in the first place. Be incredibly vigilant about phishing.
Phishing emails, texts, messages.
All of it. Be super wary of unsolicited messages asking for personal info, or, and this is key, urging you to click suspicious links or download attachments.
Because clicking that link could install the info stealer.
That's often exactly how it happens. A convincing-looking email, maybe pretending to be from your bank or a delivery service, contains a link. You click it, it downloads the malware silently in the background, and boom, your device is compromised.
So practical tips for spotting phishing.
Always check the sender's actual email address, not just the display name. Hover your mouse over links before clicking to see the real destination here, whereas like URL, does it look weird or misspelled? Be suspicious of urgent language demanding immediate action. And if you're ever unsure about a message, don't click the link. Go directly to the company's official website by typing the address yourself in your browser and log in there. Trust your gut if something feels off.
Good advice. Check sender, check links, go direct, trust gut. What's the final piece of advice?
The fourth vital step is to proactively check if your information is already out there from past breaches.
How do you do that?
Use a reputable service like Have I Been Pwned? HIBP. It's a free service run by a well-respected security expert.
And what does it do?
You can securely enter your email address, and it will check it against a massive database of known data breaches. It will tell you which breaches your email has appeared in. You can even check phone numbers now.
So it tells me if my key is likely already in those big criminal key rings.
Essentially, yes. It's a great indicator of whether your credentials might be circulating in these aggregated data sets we've been talking about. It won't tell you if you have an active infostealer infection right now, but it shows your past exposure.
And if my email does show up on Have I Been Pwned?
That's a clear signal. Change the password immediately for the breached account and critically for any other account where you might have reused that same password. And make sure MFA is enabled on those accounts. It empowers you to take direct, corrective action based on known compromises.
So it really comes down to taking control. Not just reacting to headlines, but consistently applying these layers. Unique passwords via manager, MFA everywhere, phishing vigilance, and checking your exposure.
Precisely. Knowledge is power, but only when it's understood and applied. These steps aren't just suggestions anymore. In today's world with this kind of persistent, aggregated threat, they are absolutely essential. They are your shield against the storm. They turn that feeling of helplessness into proactive defense. Hashtag outro.
Okay, so let's bring it all back home. This deep dive into the 16 billion credentials. It really showed us it's not about one single new massive company breach happening right now.
Right, that's the key takeaway on that.
Instead, it's this vast, incredibly potent compilation of previously stolen data, gathered over years, mostly through nasty infostealer malware spying on our own devices.
Exactly, harvested directly from individual users.
And this massive pile of data acts as fuel for criminals, powering widespread automated attacks like credential stuffing. And worryingly, with the richer data from infostealers, sometimes even getting around defenses like MFA, using things like store and session cookies.
It highlights the persistent cumulative nature of the threat. Old data doesn't just disappear online.
So the real power here, the insight from this deep dive, seems to be understanding that while these numbers are huge and intimidating, the most effective solutions are actually often things we can control. It puts a massive emphasis back on securing our own endpoints, right? Our own computers and phones.
Absolutely. Endpoint security is paramount. The responsibility for securing that last mile, your device, your habits, is increasingly critical. It's as important, maybe even more so sometimes, than the security of the big platforms themselves.
Which leads us to our final provocative thought for you, our listener, to chew on. This whole aggregation, the 16 billion number, proves that old information, compromised data, essentially never truly goes away in the cyber world.
It persists. It gets recycled, reused.
So what does that permanence mean for how we need to think about our digital hygiene long term? How does it change the way you view your online footprint, knowing these huge arsenals of past compromises are just constantly growing, always there, ready to be weaponized again?
It's a powerful question, isn't it?
It really underscores that digital security isn't a one-time fix. It requires continuous vigilance, constant adaptation, because the threats, like this compilation shows, are always evolving, always growing, and always finding new ways to leverage the data that's already out there. Stay safe out there.